film, his follow-up to Get Out, and we're going to talk about it right now. So my name is Kyle, and I'm going to talk about Us. It's a film by Jordan Peele, and it stars Lupita Nyong'o, Academy Award-winning actress, Winston Duke, Elisabeth Moss, and two inspired performances by the children played by Evan Alex and Shahadi Wright. And the kids are the surprising blessing in this film because they do a lot in terms of their acting and their contribution to the family and ultimately saving a lot of lives. So the way this typically works, if you're not familiar with my movie reviews, is I give the review based on 5 categories. Of those 5 categories, I run it through an equation that comes out with a 4-star ranking. And lastly, I give you my conservative take as a status of go, no go, or go with caution on whether or not you should spend your hard-earned money and see this film. So the movie is about a family, or in particularly the female, the woman, played by Lupita Nyong'o. She plays a person by the name of Adelaide, who is traumatized early as a child when she goes to her parents' summer home in Santa Cruz. She ends up wandering off. She's probably about 13 years old. She goes to a house of mirrors, sees what she thinks is a person that looks like her, and she is traumatized. She runs out, and she doesn't want to talk about it ever. So the movie starts off there around 1986, and it jumps forward to where now Adelaide is a full-grown woman, and she's with a family, her husband Gabe, her son Jason, and her daughter Zora. And they're talking about going on a trip to their family beach house in Santa Cruz again, which gives Adelaide consternation and panic attack about going back to the place where she was traumatized as a child. So Gabe has a boat and he says, you know what? It's not going to be a big deal. We're going to take this and we're going to go for it. It's no big deal, honey. We're going to take care of it. And one cool thing about this film is you'll see is that the Wilson family, which is who this family is a straight up nuclear family. It's a throwback to earlier times. The kids actually listen to their parents, and the husband and wife actually get along. The husband's a strong character who isn't like some doofball as you see typically in these shows where they denigrate the man. And they're together and they love each other. It just so happens that they're going to be put under a lot of stress later on in this movie. And by the way, I'm going to give you a spoiler section to this below when I get into my conservative take. I'm kind of giving you the gist of the story. And so in terms of story, and this is my first ranking of this film, it's absolutely phenomenal. The level of detail that the writers did for this film is incredible because it's so layered on so many different levels. The symbolism spiritually, there's symbolism from a civic or from a social standpoint. There is subtle hints and warnings about our society as we're going forward as it relates to technology, but it's very well written. And so for that standpoint alone, I don't give this often. I very rarely give a 10, but I'm going to give a 10 for the story on this because just from the sheer level of creativity, I mean, we're in 2019 and to have creative stories now, innovative stories on the motion picture screen is rare these days. And so for that, the perspective that he comes at it with, Jordan Peele, and just everything is just really, really well done. And I can't improve upon that level of it. So a 10 for the story. So my next category that I measure is emotional impact. What does a director do to make you feel emotion? Is it sad for drama? Is it laughter for comedy? And in this case, is it fear for horror? And I would have to say, absolutely. This movie's creepy, right? Straight up, it's creepy. And so I give it an 8 in that category because it's very effective in what it's trying to do, and that is to scare you. And it's good at that. So the next category that I measure is something that I call intangibles. And what intangibles is a part of the movie or parts of the movie that if you were to remove it would utterly destroy it or make it a marginal picture. Take, for example, the movie Star Wars. If you were to remove the sound editing and John Williams' score, what do you have? That's intangibles. And for this film, I'm thinking it's going to be around a 5, which is middle of the road, nothing spectacular. typically in horror films, you have the typical tropes. You have slow camera movements, you have jump scares, you have following of shots, you have misdirection, and this film is no exception. So I wouldn't consider a 5 a negative per se. It just isn't spectacular. But there could be an argument for the acting and the direction and so forth, but I'll leave that for somebody else to determine. So the next category that I look for is watchability, which simply means how often would I consider myself sitting down and watching this film or recommending it to somebody else. Now, full disclosure, I don't like horror films and nor do I really watch them. And so not only am I a little squeamish and scary, I don't like some of the demonic implications in some of these films, but because this film is what it is and because it's so popular and because it has a transcending type of appeal to it, I feel that I want to at least talk about it and review it and share my thoughts for those who may be interested in going to see this film. That being said, for watchability, I'm going to give it a 1 because there's some symbolism in here that I just don't like. And I'll mention some of that in the spoiler section on my conservative take. So the last category that I rate is called my overall impression. And this is a weighted score that I give against the others, meaning it's more important. And generally, this is my overall impression after I leave the movie theater. And so if someone were to come to me and say, hey, what's your thoughts on this movie out of 10? What's your thoughts? This would be the number I'd give it. Now, there's sometimes I'll see a movie that I like and it scores higher. And sometimes there's movies that I like and it scores lower based on the other categories. And it weights the average overall. But this number here is pretty hard to get away from. Once you set this number in stone, you're going to be a plus or minus 2 or 3 in the rankings. So that being said, I'm giving this a 7 for my overall impression. It's a very capable film, is effective in what it tries to do. The messaging, the story is phenomenal, and that plays into the overall impression. And Jordan Peele does a bang out job directing. He's got some talent, and they're calling him the next Hitchcock. That's kind of a heavy thing to give to somebody, but if he goes on this path, who knows? So this section is going to be my conservative take, where I give you a go, no go, or go with caution on this film. Now, this will be a spoiler section, so if you do not want to know anything about this film, the ending of the film, then please click in the description on the index and jump ahead. Okay, so the film Us is a movie full of symbolism. There are 2 families involved. The Wilson family, which is Lupita Nyong'o's family, and the Tyler family, which is played by Elisabeth Moss. And the Wilson family is a family which is, like I said before, a nuclear family. They're together, they listen to each other, they love each other, and they seem to be a throwback of sorts of families that you see back in the 50s, Leave the Beaver kind of stuff. The Tyler family, on the other hand, appear to be more materialistic, glued to their phones, less as a unit. And that comes into bear when the tethered, which is the doppelgängers, the people dressed in red, are coming up and trying to kill them. In fact, they end up killing them. And part of the thing is that we find out later that the tethered group, this group of people that are underground, these doppelgängers, were created by the U.S. government for the purpose of controlling the public. And that experiment failed, and then they just abandoned them down below. The movie starts off with hints of Hands Across America. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, Hands Across America was a attempt at a charity to stretch hands across America to raise money for hungry people. I believe it was in Africa. And the charity didn't raise a lot of money. It really wasn't much of a success. When it was all said and done, it ended up netting like $15 million of a goal of $50 million. So that wasn't really a success. And so that was Hands Across America, and we saw some of that in the very beginning. And there are some theories out there now that say that Us is a socialist, anti-socialist movie, and that it talks about the tethered being a group of people that are trying to take from the public stuff that's not belonging to them, and that was a anti-socialist theme throughout this movie. I'm not sure about that. You can judge for yourself, but I thought that was kind of cool to think about. This movie has a theme in it that ties back to the Bible Jeremiah chapter 11, and particularly chapter 11, verse 11, which basically says that God is not going to let the children of Israel get away with their debauchery. They're going after false gods. They are looking after false idols, and that God no longer is going to protect them from his own wrath. And that's the paraphrased version of it. That theme is in the movie several times because it does also play into the fact that the false idol aspect of it, especially if you look at it being tethered to your technology or your cell phones or whatever, led the Tyler family to be susceptible to be killed. And really, from my point of view, the Wilson family, who worked together, were able to survive because they were a nuclear family together. In fact, the children I mentioned before played a huge part in this. Jason, the son, did some really cool things, and the daughter did as well. And they helped each other out. And without the kids, this wouldn't have been a happy ending for them. You know what I mean? So anyway, but then let me get to the ending of this. So, and this right here is going to be a super spoiler. So if you don't want to know the ending of this, I'm going to spoil the ending. There is a shocking ending. So I'm going to warn you again. This is a double super duper warning spoiler. Okay. So at the end of the film, after everything's been resolved, they're in the car of the Tylers. They've been killed. They're driving off, and there's a flashback again, just like there's a flashback in the beginning, where Adelaide was at the Hall of Mirrors, and this time, instead of her running away, she realized that she is actually the original Red, who was the bad guy, doppelganger. And she actually knocked out the original Adelaide, tied her up, and left. And through the years, this explains why she can't remember the original event, because she had no recollection of anything before that anyway. And so, with that, the son, Jason, realizes this while they're in the car. He freaks out. He puts his mask back on, and they're on their way. There is some demonic symbolism in there. So if you're sensitive to that, you don't want to see that kind of representation in your movies, and you don't want to pay for that, then that's the warning there. There's definitely hardcore satanic symbolism in here. So just be mindful of that. So I say go with caution. Personally, I'm not going to see it anymore. I give it a 1 watchability for a reason. But I can respect and appreciate the talent level that it took to put this movie together. The acting is phenomenal. I like the fact that they don't mention race at all. It's just people. And so I think Jordan Peele did a bang out job on this. And I think some of you may like it, some of you won't, but that's what it is. And so for my final take, I'm going to give Us a 13, which translates to 3 stars out of 4. And I'm going to give it a go with caution as my final take for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Let me know what you think, because that's what's most important. What do you think? Did you like Us? Do you plan on seeing Us? If so, let me know in the comments below. And also, if you enjoy the content on this channel where I take content from TV, movie, and culture and filter it right, please consider liking and subscribing and sharing with your friends. And if so, please check out some of the other content I have above.